I was not born Jacke Karashae. Some of you may have already guessed that. If you hadn't guessed from the general improbability of the name itself, you may have noticed in some of my more popular videos, people referring to me by another name. Keith. And that is indeed my legal name, but in the digital space, I communicate with other people and largely identify myself as Jacke Karashae. Now, why would I do that? Good question. Nerdy story. Let's get started. When I was a kid, I was a huge fan of Star Wars. I not only had the action figures, but I would roleplay adventures in the backyard without any sort of props. I didn't even have like a toy plastic lightsaber. Everything was just completely imagined. In these adventures, and in games like TIE Fighter and Rogue Squadron, yes, I felt the need to have some sort of consistent character that I could move from adventure to adventure. And Keith just lacked a certain epicness. I mean, it's really hard to imagine like an epic struggle when you say this. A Jedi defending the Jawas. How is this possible? It must be Keith. I will deal with this one myself. So yeah, I was in a little bit of a bind with my Star Wars adventures because I didn't want to be Luke Skywalker and I didn't want to be Dash Rendar. I wanted to be someone different, someone specific, but not Keith. All of that changed one day in 1999 or 2000 when my family got like a box of cereal that had all of the Star Wars Episode 1 advertising and stuff all over it. Obviously it was targeted towards kids, and on the back there was a "Create Your Jedi Name." The first name it gave was Jacke. It had something for the last name, but I kind of didn't understand the concept of a mother's maiden name back then. Why did they use that? So from that point on, I had Jacke, but I didn't have any sort of epic last name. I spent 4 or 5 years just kind of trying things pretty much at random until I lived in Canada and I started trying to teach myself Japanese. I've had a long affinity for Japanese language and culture, but it wasn't until I sort of got to that point in like 2005 or 6 or something like that, that I actually was able to start trying to teach myself the language. It was at that point that I learned the equivalent of letters in our language in Japanese are actually consonant-vowel pairs. With this knowledge, I essentially just grabbed a few different consonant-vowel pairs. In Japanese, kind of the S and SH, like there's some weird exceptions there, so I initially just had SHE, she. So I had Karashae without the A for a while until I thought to myself, I want this to look cooler when I write it down. And in my mind, at least at that point, words that seemed sort of sophisticated and cool and stuff were words that had multiple vowels in sequence. So then I put an A in, and then that was that. At this point, everything related to this name was very kind of fantastical. I'd use the name all the time for games and for pen and paper role-playing games, Star Wars or Lord of the Rings or whatnot. But around the time that I finalized the name, or shortly after, I got exposure to like my first recording setup and started to get the idea, the notion of making music and releasing it publicly. And at that point, there was so much awesome that had just been built into that name over all those years that I just decided that I liked it more than using my legal name for my music and my eventual releases. This musician pseudonym connection was basically what led into all of the other places that I used that pseudonym. All the public social media services that I joined, I initially joined for the sake of promoting my music, promoting my band, so I essentially was making band accounts for YouTube and for Twitter and for Tumblr. And slowly and eventually that name changed from being solely like a band name to just being me. Once again, I have daily vlogs over here. It's a mobile vlog from my school and my house and all that good stuff. I've also just gotten onto VU right down there, so you can go there and ask me questions, and that would be awesome, and hopefully I can answer them. This is Jacke Karashae wishing you many epic adventures.